Hello Cloud Pedagogians, welcome to this hands-on lab where we will learn how to set up cross-region S3 bucket replication. Amazon S3 replication is an elastic, fully managed low-cost feature that replicates objects between Amazon S3 buckets. S3 replication gives you the ability to replicate data from one source bucket to multiple destination buckets in the same or different AWS regions. With S3's same region replication, you can automatically replicate data between buckets within the same AWS region. With S3 cross-region replication, you can replicate objects into other AWS regions. Our scenario is that our company have two buckets. One is CP source US East 1 S3 bucket to host critical manufacturing files even in the case of catastrophic disasters. Due to compliance requirements, the files must remain stored in the United States. To ensure that your files remain accessible even in extreme scenarios, you're going to set up cross-region replication to the US West to Oregon, which is in the other side of the country. So we explore how to use Amazon S3 to automatically replicate any object stored in our S3 bucket to a different region on the other side of the country. This process ensures our files remain accessible in any extreme scenarios where data loss could possibly occur. So by end of this lab, you will understand how to create S3 buckets and enable automatic replication to backup files in different physical locations. So when you are ready, go ahead and get going with our task. First, inside two different regions, we'll create our S3 buckets and enable versioning. And then we'll set up bucket replication from our source bucket to destination bucket. Finally, we will test and verify the backup files in the destination bucket. So start with the task 1. Create buckets and then enable the versioning. As you can see, I'm already logged into the AWS console. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is head over to S3. So we will click on the search bar and we'll search for S3. And then we'll select S3 from the results. And here we are in the S3 management console. So we need to create a bucket that's going to be in the US East 1 region. We are going to give the bucket name as CP source US East 1 and then enable the versioning. Finally, click on create bucket. Good, our source bucket is created. Next, we need to create a bucket that's going to be in the US West 2 region. So do the same process again by just changing the region name. So we are going to give the bucket name as CP destination US West 2 and now we can select copy settings from our existing bucket button. So I'll click choose button. I'll select the bucket that shows up, which is our CP source East 1 bucket, and click choose bucket. Now everything else can be left as the default, so we could scroll to the very bottom. Now enable the versioning. Finally, click on create bucket. Good job. Now we have our two buckets. The source bucket is located in US East 1 and the destination bucket is located in US West 2. In the next task, we are going to set up the replication rule. So now we need to set up our replication. So let's go ahead and select the US East 1 bucket, which is the source bucket. And in this bucket, we will select the management tab. And on this page, we see replication rules. We need to give our replication rule a name. I'll just call this CP cross region replication. And we can scroll down. Here we can see that our source bucket is the CP source US East 1 bucket, which is exactly what we want, right? And then we want to apply this to all objects in the bucket. So under choose a rule scope, we will select click apply to all objects in the bucket. And now we need to select our destination. And it is important to note that you can select an S3 bucket in another account too. But in our case, we are going to be using the one that we already created. So let's go ahead and click browse S3. And we'll select the CP destination US West 2 bucket that we created. And we will click choose path. Next up, we need an IAM role. And we will let the system create this for us. That's the great thing about AWS. We don't need to work around all of these items. So we'll select create new role. And that's all we need to change here. So we can scroll down to the bottom and then click save. And we'll get this pop-up asking if we want to replicate existing objects. In a production environment, you might want to replicate objects when you first create your application rule. But since we don't have anything in our bucket, we'll just go ahead and say no for now and click submit. And now we have a replication rule created and we see the status shows as enabled. Good work. You have set up the replication rule for your bucket. In the next task, we are going to test and verify the results. So let's go ahead and head back to our CP source east1 bucket and test our replication. So up near the top, we can click on the source bucket name and now we can upload few files and test our replication. So I'll click upload and then here you can add files. I'm going to go ahead and select few images into this to test our replication. And keep in mind this goes pretty quickly, but the larger file, the longer it will take. So just keep that in mind and we'll click upload. Alright, we see that our upload succeeded. So let's get out of here and make sure that replication is working. So I'll click to the close button. And now up here in the top, I'll click on the buckets to go back to our main bucket view in the separate tab. And now let's see the US West 2 bucket, which is CP destination US West 2. And here we can see the file that I uploaded to the source bucket has shown up in the destination bucket. So our replication rule is working as expected. If the file you uploaded isn't showing up yet, you can always click the refresh button in the browser, but it should only take a few seconds. Congratulations, you have learned how to use S3 replication to replicate objects from source to destination S3 buckets across AWS regions to meet compliance requirements, minimize latency, and increase operational efficiency. That's all for today's lab and I'll see you again in my next lab. Until then, take care and happy with learning.